Hey YouTube, welcome back to our channel. My name is Elena.
And I'm Bjorn.
And this is Vikings React, where we take a look at some of your favorite Viking TV shows and discuss their historical accuracies.
We're watching Doctor Who today. We've been watching Doctor Who for quite some time. So what does Doctor Who have to do with Vikings? We're about to find out.
It's okay to make ripples, but not tidal waves.
You are a tidal wave.
Don't say that. No, Vikings. You're in the mood for Vikings. You're coming with us.
Alright, well, we'll start with the horns on the helmets. Obviously that was not a thing. I'm pretty sure that just about everybody and their mother nowadays knows that Vikings didn't have horn helmets. We actually did have a whole discussion regarding horn helmets, and if you guys haven't seen that yet, you can check it out right up there. We'll leave you a link. Yeah, so that's the first thing that you generally notice about Viking personas. Now, there's the dude with a helmet without horns, so...
But it's also lacking the nose guard.
It also does not have the nose guard, yes.
And that was a style of helmet, but hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they lost the nose guard, and that's where like modern style helmets and stuff come from without the face plate and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So right now he's probably just wearing this backwards, which is great.
I want to see the back now.
Right? I don't know what the brass baubles and stuff on his armor is supposed to be.
Those are the Boy Scout pins.
Oh, all of his patches for like the different places that he's rated.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Checks out.
So generally helmets, back in the Viking Age, we have two different helmet types that we know of. There was the one with the nose piece and one with the full faceplate.
Yep, it's called the Yerimbu helmet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the only one that dates to the Viking Age in Scandinavia. There are other examples of helmets with faceplates, but nothing from the Viking Age. Mm-hmm. It's all like from before then, Vendel period, migration period, things like that.
Yeah. And also like nothing specifically that was found in Scandinavia.
Exactly,
itself.
yeah, that's the only one that was found in Scandinavia with that style.
Yeah, but the ones that were more prevalent around that time period were the nose.
Yep, the nasal helms.
The nasal helms.
Yep, Spangenhelm.
This is a really nice looking village, actually.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Beyond like the horn from Helm's Deep, I love this.
You can see where they're building a boat.
Yeah, you can see the keel.
Yeah. Yeah, they got the keel of the boat. They have the...
They have Arya Stark.
Oh, hey! She made it west of Westeros.
What's west of Westeros?
Vikings.
He's just wearing the glass.
Too much time travel.
The shields look heavy, too.
People talk about
They're just staring at it. I can't tell if... I just looked at the shield. I can't tell if it's like supposed to be like metal rimmed or anything.
It looks it because the reflection that's coming off of it, it looks like it's metal.
And it's like the same kind of color as like those little like four pieces that kind of intersect too.
Yeah.
The Viking shields were not lined with, they weren't rimmed with metal. It would have been leather or rawhide, which is just a less refined version of leather, basically. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have used metal for that. There was a find in Birko where they actually used some copper pieces sectionally around it to help like cinch the leather and bind it there. I don't know if the shield itself was decorative or not, because sometimes they gave weapons and armaments as gifts and wore them around ceremonially. Mm-hmm. So there are some examples of that. Like also with the shield from Valsgard and stuff, it has all those like ornate
like
metal
pieces.
decorations that are like inlaid and like inset into the shield itself.
Yeah.
And something like that would have been more ceremonial in use rather than practical. But again, they wouldn't have like lined the whole shield with it. That's too much.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for that is the weight. You know, shields themselves are pretty hefty enough, you wanted to make them as light as you could while still being able to protect yourself.
Yeah, and also there's scarcity of material and things like that, and also just there's better uses for steel than lining your shield with it when rawhide works just as well. The shield was often edged with like leather or something like that, to kind of like keep the planks in place and to help create like a tight cinching like structure to hold it all together. But it was also just to kind of protect it from wearing out across the edge as well when it get hit with swords and axes and spears and stuff. But you also necessarily wouldn't want it to like the edge to deflect blows and stuff necessarily, because one tactic that we hear of in the sagas is actually being able to catch somebody's blade in the edge of your shield. If they bury the weapon far enough into the shield itself, then they're not going to be able to wrench it back out, so you can just turn the shield around and twist the weapon out of their hand and unarm them, basically. Mm-hmm. So that it wouldn't necessarily want it to be like this metal casing around it, because you kind of want that ability to still be able to kind of catch blows here and there strategically. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know if they would go into combat looking to do that, but it is attested in the sagas. That is a written tactic that some Vikings would use.
Right. And it's something that you could do even if you didn't know the technique and weren't looking to do that. You find yourself in that situation and you catch a blade, all of a sudden you can move it around.
Yeah, and theoretically you could do that if the metal was thin enough, the sword or axe or whatever could cut through the metal. But if that's the case, why use the metal?
Yeah.
It's harder to replace, and it's more expensive and precious than a simple piece of leather.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have taken human form to walk among you. Who are you, old man? Do you not recognize the sign of Odin? You are not Odin.
It's a fun cue.
Oh, hey, look, it's Odin.
Oh, my people, I am Odin. Your mightiest warriors will feast with me tonight in the halls of Valhalla.
Okay, well, before they do that...
He doesn't need to say the halls of Valhalla. Valhalla means the halls of the slain. You don't say in the halls of the halls of the slain.
I find that comes up a lot, actually.
It does, yeah.
People can't just say in Valhalla. They tend to say...
They want to sound like extra, just like in the halls of Valhalla. It's literally in the name. It's a modern word, hall. It's in the name. Valhalla.
So,
at least he doesn't have a horned helmet. He has a winged helmet this time.
He does have a winged
helmet.
Very
Wagner-esque.
Yeah. I'm actually finding this interesting. This may be a little bit off the cuff, but I'm finding it interesting that the aliens would appear as Odin to them instead of Thor. Because back in the Viking Age, Thor was the god of the people. At least in most of Scandinavia, the god that was worshipped the most by the people, because he was the god of the people, was Thor. That's why people would wear Mjolnirs and kind of carry that symbol of him with them. The rest of the pantheon of the gods was a little bit more scattered in terms of that. They would be called on for, for protection and for harvests and all kinds of different things, but the god of the people was Thor.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly the most common god was Thor. He was everywhere. There's kind of like a modern theory that kind of how we see paganism, and I think we might have talked about this in a prior episode,
I think so.
Kind of how we see paganism might not have been how the people of 1,000 years ago saw paganism, where we kind of have like these associations of, this person or this god is the god of this and this goddess is the goddess of this, whereas that might have not been the thing back then. And they kind of have that concept in mind because we see historically certain gods or goddesses have influence over certain regions. Mm-hmm. So like you see like Odin a lot in the south, around like Denmark. You see Frey a lot in more of like the eastern area in like Sweden and further east. So they kind of think that like those kind of certain gods were more associated with those locations and might have been used as like a general all-purpose deity. Like they had other gods in the pantheon that they would, practice, or they would, call on or something like that, and during certain times or something like that. But there was still one god who, even though we might associate it with war or with fertility or something like that, would still be used as protection. That kind of thing, or just something that we don't typically associate with that being. Now, that being said, one god that we see everywhere throughout Scandinavia, everywhere, is Thor. So that we know that he was hugely worshipped all across. He was common everywhere. He was popular everywhere. He was prom king. Odin was there from pretty much the beginning, when Ymir was created by the merging of the sparks and the frost in Gnungagap exploded into life, basically, and all of that. We can get into that in a later episode. But anyways, he was one of the very first beings ever created, and he and his brothers killed Ymir and made the entire world, universe, basically, out of his body.
And that's basically why he's seen as the father of all things.
Yeah, exactly. Because from that he crafted the sky and the trees and the forests and the stones and the earth that we all walk on and everything like that. And there's a ton that goes into it. So the Doctor in this is kind of trying to play on the guise of coming down to Midgard, coming down to Earth as Odin, which is also very common that you see, almost in that kind of sense that Zeus did, that you see in Greek mythology. Odin also takes on like a simple human, almost beggar form, to walk amongst the people and kind of travel and see locations and learn things and try to find the secrets of the universe hidden everywhere in existence.
It's actually funny because when I think about the way that Odin is described when he comes down to Earth, I always think of Gandalf.
Yeah, well,
the big, gray hat, the wizened appearance and everything like that, minus an eye. But that's basically what it makes me think of a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's great, too, because that's how he's described. He comes down in, like, these, like, almost raggedy, not quite raggedy, but just these long, like, hanging over him clothes and this big cloak and this wide-brimmed hat that he's always described wearing, and he's always, a stranger missing an eye. And we know also through J.R.R. Tolkien took vast influence from the Vikings, from the Norse, from the Anglo-Saxon sagas and folklore and everything like that. So Gandalf himself was actually based on Odin.
Right.
So
hence the
good.
similarities.
Exactly. So hence the similarities. So good that's what comes to mind, because that's what's supposed to come to mind. He's this Odinic figure that J.R.R. Tolkien created for his saga.
Yeah, and the other thing to note too is when he did come down to Earth to mingle amongst the commoners, he oftentimes used different names. So he has a lot of names that he goes by, which made it really difficult to tell when it was actually him.
Exactly, yeah. He had over 100 names, I think, is attested to him, if not more.
So the other thing about Odin is that he was mostly and prominently the god of war. Which, they're kind of, playing on here. Whoever this being is that's posing as Odin, he is taking on that warlike persona, obviously, because he's sending his minions down to kill the Vikings or take the Vikings or whatever he's planning to do with them.
We're about to find out.
But he wants them in his Hall of Valhalla.
This is a harvest. The strongest, the fittest, the weak and the young, they'll leave behind.
We have to help him. Oh, this must be the Hall of Valhalla.
Stop it. Just use the horns to block the barricade. Just use it to wedge it. How did your sword break there?
All of you, stop it right now.
That looks gorgeous.
Homo sapiens, you're an intelligent species. Stop lying to yourselves.
Choose your words carefully, false Odin.
Yes, I'm a false Odin. That's exactly right. I lied. The big fella in the sky.
This is a little bit off topic, but that beast head looks so gorgeous. I do have to say that back in those ages, the shipmasters, the people who built the ships and carved those head carvings and everything, were some of the most revered members of society.
Oh yeah.
If you had a good shipmaster that could build you ships, you had it made. I'd like to know where this village is because it actually looks really cool. They found a
Yeah.
really, really good place to film this.
Yeah, they did not build the set. This is like a live-in museum thing. This is like a already built.
Yeah, I'm
thing.
curious where it is because I'd love to visit it.
Yeah, I'm wondering. There could be a couple locations. It could be like part of Reba, or it could be. I don't think it's Jorvik, but it could be part of Jorvik. I'm not sure if they have like a rebuilt area. I know they have. I know they built the Jorvik Viking Center on top of the Jorvik grave mound.
I do want to visit that.
Awesome. Like the glass floors, you can see the whole. It's
Yeah, so you
cool.
can see underground to
That's
where
so
they dug it
cool.
up.
Yeah, England, you got it made, guys. Honestly, well done.
Go to your museums. Go see this stuff.
Well, no, don't go now, but
Yeah, after they tell you it's safe.
after the plague,
Yeah.
then we'll go. Yeah, so it could be that. It could be even somewhere in Norway, Sweden, or something. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna find out.
They survived.
Sort of.
Explain.
Hey, Odin.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you afraid. Because killing us would start a fight we didn't come here to have. And you're not sure you can win. No.
So he really does have only one eye.
Yep, he's got that going for him. He's got like a little space tech visor, which is nice. I'm more looking at the breastplate.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Like
That's a
it's-
later century. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a later century and also a way earlier century.
I'm trying to place it exactly though.
Well, like the Greeks and Romans had like breastplates and stuff that would buckle in like that, and then later on, when like suits of armor became a thing, then they'd have the whole thing that would like go around their torsos and stuff. The whole like aesthetic that they have for the Vikings is this very like almost neoclassical revivalist sense of the notion, where it's like it's almost like in the Renaissance when like ancient Greece and ancient Rome were like revitalized during that time period, and they made everything super romantic and embellished, and it just kind of like put their own like contemporary stuff into like a Greek and Roman setting, basically. It's that like neoclassical style where it's all very like fancy and like romantic with like the wings that are super Wagner-esque and like the red cloak lined with gold and this like giant golden gleaming breastplate that just like has no provenance. It just reminds me of that kind of art style.
I think that may have been where they were taking a lot of their inspiration from.
I can kind of excuse it or kind of try to look past it with this concept of like a not neoclassical, but like just that revitalized notion of like a romantic era of Vikings that you see with art, I guess, but it's just frustrating when we watch so many cool historical based things in the past. I can't get over the Van Gogh episode.
Oh, the Van Gogh episode is hands down the best one.
Van Gogh episode was awesome.
Yet.
But at the same time, like I keep seeing that mixed into like BioShock.
Oh my god, yes.
Right? So it's just like this revitalized romantic Viking art style thrown into BioShock right now. And I guess I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Or I won't get behind it, but I won't get in its way.
Yeah, I think just in general, when they were drawing up the mood boards and everything for this, they were going off of that revitalization style of Vikings instead of the real historical aspect of Vikings. In that context, I'm kind of surprised that they went ahead and got a set as good as they did. Because there is a stark difference between the set and the, like...
It's a very
else.
deep contrast, and it's really frustrating.
It's really... It is a little bit bizarre to me. Good luck.
Dude just melted down a bunch of dudes to drink their, like, hype.
Okay. You mash up Vikings to make warrior juice. Nice.
Warrior juice.
What is it, God? But the cattle's name for flour.
Why are you doing this?
Why, elves? The joy of war. Can't you see it on my face?
It's a lot of teeth.
And that's no longer Odin.
Or
He does have one thing going for him. He thinks like a Viking.
he thinks like how people portray the Vikings think like.
Well, whatever that meant. The distinction here is Viking versus Norseman. You know.
Right.
Skinny-
Okay. So you're going all technical on me. Oh, great.
You know, like Vikings, like berserkers, you know, the people that relished battle and relished going out and raiding and, you know, burning villages and everything like that. It is a very stereotypical way that people think about Vikings, but there was a reason for it, you know. It wasn't all of Scandinavians that were like that, obviously, but there were specifically Vikings, the sailors who went raiding, you know, who did enjoy going into battle. It was also, you know, a belief that a warrior that died in battle would be the one to go to Valhalla and, you know, fight every day and feast in the hall, and that was seen as an honorable death.
Sure, absolutely.
So they did take pride in going into battle and dying in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had that sense of life that everything was predetermined. The day you were born, your death was already decided. So it didn't really matter what you did because you were predestined to die in a certain way. There's like a Viking saying, I guess you might say, something like similar to that. That was basically a man fated to die by hanging could never drown. You know, which is awesome, I think. So it's basically just like they believe that their life was pre-written. Basically, you know, they could only do so many things, but they can never escape fate. And every person was fated to die a certain way. So if it was in your fate, if it was your lot in life to die by the sword, then you could never drown or you could never burn or anything like that. So when you're faced with those challenges, you can rush head in and not be harmed because you'll come out the other end. And it can be tricky, I guess, but not necessarily, because you obviously don't know how you're going to die. You know, that's the great conundrum of being self-aware, is knowing you'll die and not knowing how, and it creates that terror that so many people fear, or so many people feel. But like the concept that I've always kind of heard it explained is like, if you're going into battle, you have two options. You can live or you can die. If you're going to die, there's no way that you can avoid that. So you might as well go and make the most of it and be as crazy and fierce and vicious as possible before your time comes, and gain great honor and show courage and loyalty and have everybody respect you and tell stories about your death until the world ends and you can live forever that way. Or you won't die, and therefore nothing you do will get you killed, and you can still fight with the same vigor, the same ferocity, the same intensity, and do all those things, and have your story still told forever. So it's kind of like a win-win when you put it that way, you know? So it kind of created this, like, vicious mentality, essentially, supposedly.
Every misfortune of this village is down to you. She thinks she brings us bad luck.
Oh, bad luck. You haven't had any bad luck. You're fine.
That's a gorgeous longhouse, too.
Yes.
This set is amazing, guys. This is awesome.
Leave.
We're really excited about it.
Take off. So, what are you? Farmers, fishermen, web designers. Maybe not that last one.
We are Vikings!
Quickly, fishermen, farmers, web designers. That's what he said.
He said web designers.
Yeah, he went, what are you, fishermen, farmers, web designers? Maybe not that last one. You didn't get that? No. Anyways, fishermen, farmers, web designers, they would have all been Vikings, technically speaking.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really have like an official standardized military that were warriors. They did have some here and there who their profession was a warrior. But that was very, very small in comparison. Most Vikings were fishermen, farmers, web designers. So this whole argument is kind of invalid.
Yeah, and that's something that, doesn't get talked about nearly enough, I feel like. Most of the time, Scandinavian people would be working on their farms. You would work your farm, you would take care of your cattle, you would go out fishing. It was a way of life, You could be a merchant. You could do all sorts of different professions. You could be a blacksmith. Basically anything that put food on the table. You needed to be able to take care of yourself and your family, and live through life. So when you had a village and your jarl, let's say, called on you to defend his part of the land, or whatever happened, it would be the farmers, it would be the fishermen that would take up arms to defend that country. And a lot of the times they'd go into battle with just axes, and they would be given a shield by their jarl, or
Spear.
or spear, because those weapons, you didn't have to be as proficient with them, at least with a spear, but also everyone had axes on the farms. You kind of needed them.
Yeah, it was like a
your
hammer.
tools.
Like go into your homes right now and grab a hammer was the same equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's the equivalent of, the village going into battle with pitchforks,
I mean, pretty much, yeah. Pitchfork's a good weapon.
Yeah, and then you have like your shield that would be given to you because those were decently cheap. So swords were a property of wealthier men.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd have all walks of life that would go into battle and defend their own.
Yeah, exactly. All these fishermen and farmers and tradesmen stuff would be Vikings. A Viking was something you could just do as a pastime or just for a little bit of time if you just needed some extra coin, basically. If you had a boat, if you were lucky enough to own a boat, or if you knew somebody who did and was looking for a crew, you could basically sign on with them and go raiding for a few months, a few years, and then come back wealthier and just go back to farming, basically. And that was it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the other way that it would have happened is the way that wealth and land was passed down is generally the oldest son would inherit the land or the farm.
Yep.
That his family owned. So if you were unfortunate enough to be the second son or third son, or God forbid the fourth son,
That poor woman.
yeah, you would basically either be stuck on the farm working for your older brother, or you could go out raiding and make your own wealth out of that.
Talk to any younger brother, they would rather almost risk dying than work for their brother.
Tell me this. How many people here have actually held a sword in battle? By a show of hands.
I want a farm with chickens.
Same.
It's lofty. You're lofty. You're Daphne. You're
It's a
not gonna
painted
knock.
stone
Yeah.
and
ZZ
carved.
Top. And
I like
you're,
ZZ
ZZ Top.
ZZ Top's my favorite so far. I was gonna say actually that stone looks like it looks like a replica of the one from Yelling in Denmark. It's awesome. It has like one of like the only depictions of Jesus for the Viking Age, and he's like this swole dude. It's like great. It's like on one side, so it's a testament to Harold Bluetooth, who he was the king of Denmark at the time. United Denmark. He'd made Denmark Christian. But yeah, so like there's a big runestone that was made and at station to him, and it was like painted and all kinds of shit. It's really dope, and it has on one side this like awesome like intricate beast, and on the other side it has Jesus, and it's like him in these feathers, but he's like breaking out of them, so it's like swole Jesus, like busting out. It was cool.
That's really cool that they have like an actual like painted runestone in the back there.
Yeah, makes me think they're in Denmark.
Could be.
We'll find out.
I think we're getting closer to locating this thing.
Find out.
You know that plan, and sometimes, if you're very lucky,
If I can take a selfie.
tell you, this is for a shield here.
Sure.
Yeesh.
We deploy the hand. Now, this
Leave it to
thing,
ZZ
give me
Top.
one of the helmets. It's key. We get a helmet.
I want to see that boat finished. Like, it just makes me happy seeing that.
Never mind. I want to see this town. I want to see this village. Nice.
Happy ending.
Lol.
Okay, so that was a reference to the world serpent, Jormungandr. I'm probably butchering the name.
Jormungandr.
What?
Jormungandr.
Yeah, I can never say it. Like, it's just too many
It's
letters.
a lot of letters.
I can never say it correctly, but the world serpent. Again, just kind of going back to what we were talking about, how he appeared as Odin instead of Thor. Again, I feel like this was kind of a missed opportunity for them because in Norse mythology during Ragnarok, Thor was the one that fought the world serpent, and they actually ended up killing each other. Should have been a wolf.
Would have been cool to be a wolf.
Giant wolf.
Yeah. But again, dragon head, serpent head, you know. Work with what you got.
Yeah.
If you don't leave right now, I'll put it out there for all to see, and no one will see you again.
Good job, guys. You did it. Ooh, is there gonna be another Viking episode? I'm gonna find her a million years in the future. Stay tuned.
Oh boy.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
All right.
Nothing I haven't already said before. Honestly, the whole neo-revitalist, romantic era kind of style of depicting Vikings mixed with a terrible contrast of like really historic setting, set in sci-fi space travel time. Like, I don't know, my emotions are going all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to note is, you know, we've been watching Doctor Who for 9 seasons now, so like we know the level of historical accuracy they can or cannot achieve, but like even just watching like the Victorian episodes and other historical episodes, some that hit a little bit closer to home than others.
Yeah.
And we're not really super versed in other segments of history as we are in Vikings, so sometimes it's difficult to pick those things out. It's one of those things where we have to take this with a grain of salt, right? You know, like
Literally forced to.
obviously they're not going to be 100% historically accurate here, or, you know, they're 50% there, you know, they have the setting, but they don't really have the costuming.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing that I was noticing throughout the episode is like they definitely didn't have the costuming, but then they also did. Like there was the ridiculous horn helmets and the horrible armor, and the girl at the end who was wearing like a cut-off t-shirt version of a burlap sack. But then also like the dude had a legitimate like heavy detailed beautiful arm ring.
I did notice that.
The couple of the guys, like one of the guys, that bigger one who was just like, "We will fight" kind of thing. He had like this really like this simple but like beautiful intricate like pendant that is Viking. The father of Arya Stark there, the father of Viking Arya, his like under tunic you could see like by the neckline it had the herringbone detailing to decorate an ornament across like the neckline, which was also historic, and like just those little details that I live for. It was awesome to see, kind of like peeking out here and there, but then you could also tell like that was the clothing that whatever set they were on supplied them, and then they threw their own shit on top of it, where it's like, well, why would you do this?
There was also one of the background Vikings that I did notice he had like a pretty nicely made tunic on as well. It had that typical like key neckline that you see in Viking tunics.
Right.
That was made like pretty well and looked pretty
Yeah, I
historic.
saw one that like looked like mine. It was like the exact same pattern. It was
I didn't
the one
catch
I
that.
got from Slav Medieval.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that one.
Yeah. It was funny to see.
So yeah, like obviously they were provided certain things that are historically accurate, and then they decided to also supplement from their own props and costuming department that didn't do as much research or looking into it, or whatever where that fell apart, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, they're about 50-50 in this whole thing.
It was fine. It was Doctor Who. That's... yeah. Yep.
I do really enjoy the series, so
Yeah, the series is great.
yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified of our future videos, and we'll see you in the next one.
We moved the cat tree in the hopes that it would move the cat with it. And so far it hasn't. She doesn't like change.
The cat is very confused.